And the best way to talk to other people is not to talk to them, but to show them. So this picture, we just take a look at it. This is a chart called Climate Stripes. So you may have seen a chart of average temperature in the world over time, over the last couple centuries, that was just kind of a line going up. That does tell you something about the data, but this is meant to make it more presentable. So here you can see the colors tell you whether the average temperature for this year, from 1850 to now, was warmer or colder than the average across this period. So dark blue is the coldest, dark red is the warmest, white is neutral, and then you've got a whole spectrum in between. So you can see that temperatures are hot recently. Ever since about the 90s, they've been above average for almost every year. Whereas previously they were below average, partly because it's averaged across this entire line, so it must be colder than the very hot part recently. But also because in the 1850s, the world was concluding a period in European climate history called the Little Ice Age, where temperatures were colder than usual. For reasons that are debated, some people say it's because of the lesser amount of sunspots that year. Sunspots are interestingly tied in with weather. Some people say it was from volcanic eruptions. People aren't too sure, but the world, or Europe, was colder then. But it continued based off a trend. And starting in the 1800s, people started burning fossil fuels, coal, petroleum, and as we know, that those emissions led to rapid warming recently and projected to continue. So you can see that almost all of the hottest years we have on record have occurred recently. So this is a visualization that is very simple. All it uses is color and a timeline, but it tells a story right away. And as you can see, Bill Gates thinks it's very. Let's show you a different kind of visualization. And I want you to look at what I'm about to play and try to think what information is being conveyed. Why the person that made this chose to do it the way they did. Sound? Did when I got here.
I had a little to play one in.
Yeah, and
I think it just has
to Okay, so let's stop here so we have a nice view of this part of the visualization. So can anybody tell me one of the things that is being shown here?
They're using different colors to represent which part or which instrument is doing what sound and for what length.
That's right. So we've got what are called parts. And so for symphony, like Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, there's going to be a lot of different instruments, a lot of different musicians, and therefore a lot of different parts. So yeah, like you said, for example, this teal is one instrument doing one part. Is there any other information being shown here?
You can also see which notes are maybe higher than others and which instruments are probably have higher notes rather than maybe a different instrument having lower notes.
Yeah. So how are they showing us the pitch?
Up and down.
Yeah. So as we see, higher notes are higher up, lower notes are down lower. And this is using what's called semitones. So you can see they're kind of divided into blocks. So each block is a 1/12 of an octave, is a half of a tone. And this is a pretty typical way of doing music. If you've heard of the A through G scale, A sharp, B, C, etc. That's what this is. Another way to do it might be frequency. So it might be just increasing in pitch. And that would look pretty differently because, for example, if you count, like I said, 12 semitones, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That gap, that's one octave. So that's the difference between like, that's actually a doubling in pitch. So if you have like zero hertz, zero frequency here, and you have a note, like middle C, and then you double it, you go to another octave, that doubling is going to mean that this is much farther away from here than it is from here in actual pitch. But they chose to use semitones. Okay, anything else represented here that people notice? Any other information that's being encoded? What about the width? Oh, go ahead.
So the width of them is like the speed of when notes going to play.
Yeah. So these little narrow bars. This is called pizzicato. When for example, a violinist just does a little strum on their string with their bow. These short notes you can see that they're short because they're very narrow, whereas this long stretch is a sustained note. Okay, so we have colors representing parts. We have vertical displacement representing pitch. We have the length representing the duration. That may be the basic elements of this visualization. Oh, go ahead.
You can also see what's coming up next.
This is true.
So it's not just a moment in time. You also see this very simple part, then the complex parts coming up shortly.
Yeah, what I really enjoyed when I was watching this just now is this section. So this part, which is the part where it's like da 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 da. So it's kind of building tension here for this very dramatic part over here. So you can see that. You can see that this part of the symphony is quite different from this part, and it's visually very appealing. It's like a little motif. Okay, what might you want to know about Beethoven's Fifth that this doesn't tell you? Go ahead.
The type of music he played or does.
So something about kind of like the genre. Like if you just looked at this and you didn't hear it, you might not know if it's classical music or rock. Go ahead.
You might want to also know what colors stand for which instruments, so you might want to know
This is true. Yeah, it doesn't have a key or a legend, so you can listen and try to guess what kind of instrument. You might know that a deep sound is a cello, but you don't see that here.
Which note you're playing at which time?
Oh, okay. So labeling of the notes. Anybody else? One thing that struck me is loudness is not represented here. So this piece especially has an effect where it goes between soft, kind of contemplative parts, and then just this booming resonance. But each note here, it has the width, but otherwise it's just a rectangle. It's just saying this note, the semitone is playing for this amount of time. It doesn't tell you how loud it is. So we can see that visualizations, and one might not want to take the word visualization too literally. Obviously, this is visualizing the music; it's making it visual, but it works with the music. So you might think that sound, touch even, is a very useful way to convey information. And what we're going for here is, this is quantitative information. Each of the beginnings and ends of each of these bars is a time signature. It has a certain number of seconds or milliseconds since the beginning of the piece. But we don't need to burden who we're trying to communicate with all those numbers. We can just say, here's the block, begins here, ends here. We're going to highlight the one currently playing.
Here's another story most of you might be familiar with. Any guesses?
Politics.
2016 presidential election?
Yeah.
Said something else? Republican Democrat. So we're talking about variables. We're talking about, what are some of the other variables? We're talking about Republican Democrat. Other things displayed?
How many?
How many? States. We're talking about states. States are displayed. Okay.
Who won one state?
Who won one state? It's a binary, right? It's either Republican or Democrat. Unfortunately, I don't have a legend on here, so we're all kind of just talking about the story we already know about this map, right?
No Alaska or Hawaii.
No Alaska or Hawaii. You're correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Forget about those conveniently. The map would be very, very large if that were the case. So, all right. Here's something else. So this tells one story. This gets into a little bit of the nuances of the story. What is this now?
Oh, it's ancient life.
Population and electoral college.
Okay. This is. How do we know that? Because it says it on this. It says it on the diagram, right?
But it shows how small populations are. It shows how small population is in the college.
Yeah. So what we're doing here, this scales, and when we call scales, this draws the relative relative space on the graph, or relative space on the map according to population. And as we all know, maybe some of us know, don't assume anything. As the United States has an electoral college system, which is slightly out of alignment with states' populations. So this is scaled by population. This is scaled by electoral college representation. And I can create a really simple animation just by flipping back and forth between the two slides. And what are some things you notice?
It doesn't get much bigger.
Doesn't get much bigger?
The electoral college isn't representative of the population like it's supposed to be.
Why do you say that?
Because it's not the exact same.
It's not the exact same. What slightly changes? What's really obvious?
Montana.
Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, the heavily rural states. Right? So watch up in this area. You can see those rural states just kind of pulsing. And that's actually by design. The original motivation behind the Electoral College was to have rural representation instead of just outright population representation. Okay. You also see the same thing with Maine up in the upper corner. Okay. This is another story, and it's kind of fun. I'll show you a version of this in a little bit. But this is by county. This is the electoral result simply by county. And this is a different way of showing it. This is the population vote scaled by county. Yeah, it looks totally weird. It's something you're used to seeing that, right? That tells you a little bit more nuance. What are some obvious things that really pop out at you here? Maybe more blue. What areas really pop out?
How most of what's on this side and this side are mostly have a lot more blue, but then in the middle it has a whole lot of red.
Okay.
And then and just a few little pieces of blue.
A few little buckets of blue, a lot of blue on the sides.
More of the larger states and cities are blue than more like, I guess you'd say the small farm and rural areas are red.
Very correct. What's correct? I mean, here we have, what's this? California, but what's this?
The Pacific Northwest. Like the Pacific Northwest?
Nope.
That's the Bay. Oh, the Bay.
What's that? That's just San Francisco. That's the population of San Francisco.
That's crazy. You can't even see the Bay when you look at the map of the U.S.
Exactly. Check it out. Right? What's this area here?
New York.
New York. Where's New Mexico?
You can't even tell. Where's that from?
Right there. So that little blue island up there. See how big New Mexico looks on the map?
Yes.
Scaled to population, we're about that big. Also, you see those. What are the blue islands in the middle? Somebody got it.
Places of high population.
Places of high population. Those are all these cities in the Midwest, right? So here you can kind of tell another story where the rural areas maybe tend to vote one way, the cities tend to vote another way. And we're throwing another variable on you. So this is instead of just 2, right? What are the 2? What are the colors representing? Republican and Democrat. Okay. What's this? What do you think this might be?
The in-between. In between.
Nope. I mean, I'll just say no. I don't like to say no, but it's no in this case.
Libertarian.
Nope.
No, it's by county.
This is by county still.
And it's like adjusted for like a minority. Yeah. So
Close.
like if the Democrats are the minority, then it's still a little blue instead of just all red.
Correct.
Right. The ones that are
You're on the right track.
like you can't know what you said because it's like the ones that are a majority of Democrat, there's some there's Republican, there's not much minority.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, very, very good. So what this is representing, instead of just a single variable, a single binary variable, right? Instead of up or down, left or right, red or blue, Republican or Democrat, here we're scaling the color itself. So the really, really blue, this is Albuquerque, the really, really blue is something like over 60 or over 70% vote for Democrat. The really, really red is scaled the same way, like over 60 or 70% vote for Republican, right? So you see like the really, really dark red rural areas, really, really dark blue urban areas. And there are some exceptions, like I like displaying information like this because you can look at it. You can get lost in it yourself. You can find out where you're from. You can see what your, what your home state, your hometown, your home county might be. You can go like, why on earth is this place up in here so dark blue when it's surrounded by red? What might that be? Things like that. All these things tell a story. And the rabbit hole goes further deep, right? We go further deeper in the rabbit hole with this one. So this is scaling population, scaling percentage of victory. All right. So now it shows you a little bit of a different narrative, right? So we have these cities. So even though this city might have be in the Midwest, for instance, and on our map previously was just red, now we can see it's a battleground. Now we can see it's a battleground area, a battleground county. It just barely went Republican. So that might tell us something about if we are working with elections, we can target these cities and say, they just barely went this way, or this just barely went blue. We can talk about flipping those. And other stuff like the Bay Area, if we're Republican strategists, we don't bother going there because we're never going to win. Or at least conventionally, right? Or also likewise in the Midwest. But you see these like filaments that look like taffy, right? Connecting, surrounding the big population centers with these little filaments of low population. So like I said, this is the work of Mark Newman out of Michigan. This is on the right side is the map you might be used to seeing, and on the left side, on the left is the map you're used to seeing. On the right side is a map you might not be used to seeing, but also tells a bit of a different story.
All right, any guesses what this one's showing? Well, first let's just take a look at what we have here. So the first thing I see is that it's in French. So unfortunately, even though it does have a title, it does have a legend, I can't read it. Maybe some of you know French and can read it. But what can we guess just based off of the shapes here? So here we've got what looks like maybe a chart of some sort. We've got an axis here. It goes from 0 to 30, although kind of the opposite direction, which you would usually think. We see here, this label here, it says Moscow. I know what that means.
It might be a picture or a graph of a place because I can tell that there's measurements right there.
Oh, yeah, okay, so there's a scale here. So yeah, so you're right, this is a map. So we can see, I think this town is a town in Poland, and over there is Moscow, the capital of Russia. So this is a visualization of a march. So this is an army, Napoleon's army. You can see. Okay, it doesn't say Napoleon right out. It says the French army, and they're invading Russia in 1812 to 1813. So they start out, they head out from France, obviously, but they've gotten this far. They've gotten to Poland, and they've got a huge army, and that's represented by the width of this line. And this, and you can see it tells you how many people. 422,000. So there's 422,000 soldiers marching in that army. Does anybody know the population of, say, Albuquerque? Does anybody live in Albuquerque? 2 people? So Albuquerque has about 1 million people. So about half in Albuquerque is marching. But as we can see, it decreased over time. Why do people think that is?
Disease.
Right?
Lack of food or water or maybe medicine.
Right, so they either die from an illness or they starve to death. Any other ideas? What do people think this chart is showing? why is there a chart? And we can see there's lines that are tying it to various points.
I've seen this before. They did separate, like the Army did separate early on. That's what the second line is showing.
Okay, so these are defectors.
Yeah, they separated. But then the Army also did dwindle in numbers.
So it's if you take a look here, I don't know French, but I do know that French is a little like English. So we see this as a graphic table, what we might call a chart, of temperature in degrees on a thermometer, and they use a kind of weird scale called Reaumur. So yeah, this is temperature over time. So we can see it's really cold here, at minus 30, and then warms up a little bit. But they were marching during a brutal Russian winter. A lot of people were getting frostbite, getting illness. They were not happy. Many of them died or simply left, defected. They're like, screw this, I'm going to go back home to France. So you can see by the time we get to Moscow, we go from 422,000 to 400,000. A little branch leaves to go for, say, we have 145,000. By the time they get to Moscow, they're only 100,000. They're a quarter of what they started out with. JP, do you know what year this was produced?
This was done in the 1830s.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 1869.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay.
We can read. You want me to explain this one?
Go for it.
Okay. So this is hi everybody, JP. Met some of you. Know some, I don't know others, but so this is my contribution to this data visualization. This is one of the coolest, most interesting charts you will ever see, and scaled to time, if you will. Like this being done in 1869 is so data dense that it's hard to wrap your mind around. So like Arlo was saying, you have this is the equivalent of the defeat of the Nazis in Moscow in 1810. And that's how crushing France was defeated. France owned the world in 1810. Napoleon decides to march on Moscow and to try to conquer Russia, which never do that. If you're ever in charge of anything, never try to conquer Moscow, especially in winter. So this shows, starting from Krono, Poland, marching to Moscow, starting with an army of 420,000 people. The war, attrition, starvation, disease takes Napoleon's army from 400,000 people, as I was saying, down to about 100,000 people by the time he gets to Moscow. The Russian army manages to rout Napoleon at Moscow, and Menard shows it by going with the tan to Moscow, and the rout is in black when Napoleon's army is defeated. All right. Here's what's going on with this scale on the bottom. So this represents the retreat from Moscow in terms of temperature. You have points below zero. Remember, this is the Russian winter. If you think that Santa Fe gets cold, or if you think that Espanola gets cold, this is really cold, negative 30 below in the Russian winter. All right. So starting from Moscow, you can see the army starts retreating, 100,000 people, dwindling 96,000 people, 87,000 people, and Menard is drawing points to certain events with evenings. And you can see at each of these points, if you look really closely, there are these little notches on the retreating army. This represents tens of thousands of people now. And this is really cool stuff. This is a little branch where the initial invading army kind of takes this little town here. And this is a reinforcement. So you can see 30,000 people joining with 80,000, joining with 20,000 people, and we have 50,000 people. Negative 20 below one evening, they're trying to cross a river. And this retreating army goes on this frozen river. The river cracks beneath them, and 30,000 people fall into the water and drown and die. That's represented by just a little bitty this line of, what, 60,000 people goes down to 30,000 people like that. By the time they get back home, 4,000 people remain. So that's the story of Napoleon's defeat in graphic form with very cold, hard data. This map represents, what variables are we talking about here? What have I just talked about? What are we showing? I mean, anything, like.
There's writing in French that I see.
There's writing in French?
Yeah.
Yes. I wish I could read French.
It's basically like a timeline of the whole fight.
Timeline, as well as?
I don't know.
You're close. So it's both time and.
Oh, I know it's not space.
It is space.
Oh, it is space.
Yes, this is both time and a map. So it's showing the army advancing. It shows X, Y coordinates. It shows the relative position of the army on a map. It shows the size of the army. It shows the time of the army. So if they can do this in 1869, imagine what we can do today.
So, JP, I've heard this was called like the first infographic.
This is the first serious infographic. I stole this from Ed Tufte, who does data visualization. This is a really dense infographic. The cool thing about these things is you can look at them, and you can get lost in the story. There's not just one thing that's telling you. You can look at the parts that are interesting to you, like where were they retreating? Where were they on this day of retreat? What was the temperature at this day of retreat? You can really get lost in the data. But
yeah, thank you for covering that.
So this is visualization of human brain. How many of you like biology here? You do like biology? You like biology? I've never liked biology actually. I was really bad at it in high school. That's why I'm studying computer science. Okay, anyway, so this is the human cortex, and you can see that how much area of the human cortex is used for which part of our organ. So if you look at a human body like in a normal shape, then you cannot kind of understand that that small part of your body is using that much brain space. Except for our hand, it's very small compared to the other parts of our body. And if you look at this one, so this is scaled in terms of how many space in cortex you are using. So your hand, these small hands gets really big here in motor model because your hands use most of your brain. So you cannot understand this by looking at the normal human body picture. So when you scale it in terms of the data that you are trying to represent, then it becomes interesting and it becomes very relevant. So if you like show it to someone and ask, okay, I have scaled it in terms of the motor uses of the cortex uses of our brain, and if you ask them that, okay, what do you understand from it? Which part of our body uses the most part of our brain? And then they can easily answer it. But if you just show someone a normal human body picture, it won't be able to, it's not clear that what the data is trying to represent. Okay, I thought I would just show you because I like this picture a lot.
Can we go back for a second?
Yeah.
So how do people think that, so obviously this is sculpted, but how do people think that they got the data to sculpt this? Like, how do we know that the hands take up the largest area of the motor cortex?
Maybe people don't use their organs in different times and they went off of those.
So like they looked at the brain and they were somehow able to connect it?
Yeah.
Right, and any other?
Brain scans, they would hook up your brain to your activities and you would do certain things.
Anybody else have any other guesses?
They would make you do something and then they would look at how your brain reacts to it, part of your brain went off. Like, let's say each part of the brain had a light bulb, and maybe whenever you moved your hand, a big part of the brain had a light bulb and it went off.
So they were like measuring the brain when you were moving around, or various parts of your body were being prodded. Yeah, that's basically it. Oh, go ahead.
Can I use that?
Oh, sure, go ahead. Yeah, at any time if you need to use the bathroom, just go. Yeah, so this research, these particular homunculi were made in the 70s. But this is based off research dating back even to the 30s. So before they had MRI machines and other ways to scan the brain non-intrusively, they would go to people with a problem with their brain that they were trying to fix. And they just try to see, okay, well, which part of the brain is connected to what, so that way we can try to fix the part that's broken and not mess up anything else. So it's kind of gruesome, but I think it's also kind of cool. So I'm trying to imagine how they would do this, and I presume that they just they have you awake, and then they have your brain exposed, and then they're like, all right, you're going to poke this part of the brain. Do you feel anything? Where do you feel it? Go ahead.
I'm sure they would have to have you awake because although your brain can't feel past that point, it's very easy to just kill anybody when you have their brain exposed with them being asleep.
Yeah, I think it's like not too unusual actually that they'll keep you awake. But they over the cortex, So if we look at this picture, this is kind of a slice, like not a slice. They weren't slicing the brain; they're just poking it. But if you imagine kind of like a plane going through your head this way, this is I think like this part. So it's the right half, and kind of through the middle. And so in Latin the word cortex means skin. So this is just the skin, just the outside of the brain, and all these wrinkles. They would poke here and say, okay, where'd you feel that? Oh, I felt that in my tongue. Poke here. Oh, I felt that in my nose. So that's sensory. So if you look at this guy on the left, part of your cortex, where'd you feel that? On this part of my hand. Elsewhere, on this part of my hand. Elsewhere, nose. So they said, okay, the largest area of the sensory cortex is devoted to the hands. So, so this is a great way to just say, okay, this thing that we don't really understand fully, the brain, here's maybe one way of looking at it, of what it prioritizes. It thinks that being able to move the hands around and being able to feel with the hands, really important. Okay, what do people think this map represents? Any guesses?
A certain section of a city.
All right. What do you think?
I think I saw this recently. Is it the one where diseases in the water?
Good guess. Anybody else care to speculate, for example, what these X's are or what these dots are? All right, so this is part of London, and this is not modern day London. This is London in the 1820s, and this is a map drawn by a doctor named John Snow, no relation to the Game of Thrones character, and he was living in this part of London. I forget what this neighborhood is called, but he was treating a lot of cases of a disease called cholera. Today we know that cholera is bacterium, Vibrio cholera, and that it lives in water, like in water that's contaminated by feces, by poop. But back then they didn't know that. They didn't quite have germ theory yet. They had to wait a couple more decades for Louis Pasteur to say, I think there's these germs causing it, and we can kill them by pasteurizing it. We can heat things up and kill the germs and prevent the spread of disease. You want to say something? Yeah, go ahead. So they didn't tie it to a bacterium, but they were starting to kind of develop an understanding of diseases. And so they're treating cholera. As far as I know, the treatment back then was basically to give somebody lots of water because they dehydrate. they lose a lot of water. It's a very unpleasant disease. Don't ever get cholera. But he noticed that a lot of his patients were coming from the same neighborhood, and he kind of wondered why that was. So he decided to make a map. He asked each patient where they lived, put a dot down there, and built up kind of a map of cases. He says, okay, so these cases are clustered around a certain area, and I wonder what that means, what's in that area. And he had a hunch that it was something people got through their water. So he mapped all the wells, and said, here's a pump that people would go and fill the water that they needed for the day, the baths and cooking water and water to drink. And there's a few all over. And people might go to one or another just depending on which one they happen to be closest to. But mostly he thought people would go to the ones closest to their house. And he saw that right in the center of this cluster of these cholera cases, there's one pump on Broad Street. Now, he had a hypothesis. He said, okay, I think that this outbreak of cholera was caused by something in the water at this particular pump. Now, what way do you think he might go about testing if this hypothesis is at all true? Okay, so he might take a sample of the water? But remember, they don't know what a bacterium is. I guess some small things have been observed under a microscope. A microscope had already been invented by a Dutch person, von Leeuwenhoek, and an English person, Robert Hooke. And they observed little animals under the microscope. They called them animal peels. But they didn't necessarily know that that's what caused disease. So he might look at the water, and maybe he would figure that out. What's another way that he could say, all right, this water is causing this disease? So he figured, well, if it's causing the disease, and I take it away, and the disease stops, well, that will tell you right there, it must be causing a disease. So without asking anybody's permission, he figured, I'm just going to go ahead and do this, and if it works out, then it'll prove my idea. He just went ahead to Broad Street, and he just vandalized the pump. He just took the handle off, people couldn't use it, but there were no new outbreaks of cholera. The disease progression stopped. And so he was able to take this map to the local authorities and say, hey, I think cholera is caused by water, and I think, every time there's a cholera outbreak, we need to make sure that the water isn't getting contaminated. I think they later, if I remember the story right, did look in the well and find some sort of dead animal that was causing it. So this goes to show just how old visualization is. We've been doing this for a long time.
This is rock, paper, scissors. All right. So has anyone not played rock, paper, scissors? Okay. So imagine that I have everybody in this room right now, and you turn to a random partner. Let's do that. Let's do that right now. All right. Turn to a random partner. Here's the rules. So we're gonna create a very, very simple model in here. I want you to play rock, paper, scissors against a random partner. And if you lose, you're going to become their breed. You're going to become their character.
What?
Oh. Does that make sense? So we're going to play rock, paper, scissors against a random partner. If you lose, you're going to assume the identity of the person you lost to. So if I throw rock and you throw paper, I'm going to become paper. So we're going to do several rounds. So, ready. Does everyone have a partner? Does anyone not have a partner? Excellent. On the count of 3, ready. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
Yes.
Then you're both the same. Then you stay. Okay. Everyone got that? Okay. So now you should both be the same, right? Who's rock? Raise your hand. Paper, raise your hand. Scissors, raise your hand. All right. We're going to do another round. Turn to another person around you. Pick another person. All right? And it's rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Ready? Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Okay. Assume the identity of the person you lost to. Okay. Ready for round 3. Pick another random person. Pick another random person. Ready? Round 3, here we go. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Okay? All right, let's see if this works. Okay, everybody who is paper, raise your hand. If you're paper, raise your hand. If you're rock, raise your hand. If you're scissors, raise your hand. Okay. What are some things we noticed? I mean, about the entire group. One more round? One more round. Okay. Pick somebody at random now. Pick somebody else. We're going to play one more round. See if we can fill that.
What do you do? Do you use?
Okay.
Hey, you have a good shoot. Ready?
All right, ready? On the count of 3. Ready? Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Okay. All right. All of the rock, raise your hand. Paper, raise your hand. Scissors, raise your hand. All right. Cool. So this is a NetLogo model, and I think a lot of you have been exposed to NetLogo. It's a really, really cool tool. And I'll explain a little bit about it in a minute. This is basically what we've been doing. So this is called rock, paper, scissors on a lattice. Rock, paper, scissors on a grid, or rock, paper, scissors with dimension, or rock, paper, scissors iterated, if you will. All right? So I'm just going to have everybody play. Ready? Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Doop. What happened? Doop. What happened? I don't know. Doop. What happened? I don't know. So now let's tell this game to play just like we're doing here. Let's tell it to play like 1,000 rounds. Ready? And we can count the number of rounds. See where it says ticks up there? Yeah. Those are the number of rounds. Okay? So check it out.
Although they're transferring in
Okay, what do we see?
They're doing exactly what you were telling us to do in the game. They're taking each other's identities based on who wins and who loses.
Correct. They're taking each other's identity based on who wins and who loses. I'm going to really crank up the speed on this model. So now we've played 1,000 rounds. So there's 2 things going on. I have 2 data visualizations on this that can tell us 2 different things about this thing. All right? This is the world. This just gives us a graphical representation of where you can actually see like these waves spreading out. So you see this group. Oh, they just spilled all the rocks. So they spilled all the paper. So you can see the waves spreading out. You can see these just as we were in here. You can see the wave of papers, the wave of scissors. So no one group becomes dominant. The other thing I'm visualizing is here. And what is that?
Telling you what's there more of.
Telling us what there is more of. Yes. How do you know when there's more of one thing?
by the graph, the blue is the blue line, and it will, whichever one goes higher than the other two.
Exactly. So this is a line graph. I'm displaying this data two ways. I'm displaying it qualitatively, okay? A quality of the model. All right. So our qualitative data is this. We don't have any numbers coming out of this. All right. This just shows us like, oh, this is cool. We have these waves of victories and these waves of people like losing. All right. And then I have my quantitative side of this model. All right. My quantitative side is the population of any breed in this model. So exactly right. When we have a high peak of like the blue, we know there are more blues. When we have a high peak of reds, we know there are more reds. When we have a high peak of greens, we know there are more greens. In this case, I forgot exactly what the population was, but let's see if I can change the parameters enough that we can get everybody to be the same. Oh no. I don't know. Actually, we'd have to change the size of the world. Let's do that. Check this out. Sorry, I'm just playing around now. The world turned to one of them, okay? So we can tell what this model did, right? You can see this doesn't tell us much anymore, right? This just tells us that like one thing is getting dominant. This graph, the quantitative graph, tells us a lot more. It says these big oscillations, increasing oscillations. So one population gains dominance, and then the other population gains dominance, all right? In a cyclical nature. It's actually random as to which one wins out because you have equal chances. But a lot of life is luck. Cool.
I heard they use this to model the population of lizards, population of bacteria.
Yes, there are rock paper scissors strategies throughout. This is something you're all very familiar with, but not used to seeing in this way. Diagram. A mind map. Okay. These are actually accurate because I don't have any labels on this one. This is a graph. This is just a graph. We have what's called edges and nodes, or nodes and edges. The nodes are the circles, and the edges are the lines between them. And this can represent a lot of different things. This can represent. I'll continue on. In this case, this is a friendship network. So you might be number one. You might know a couple of people, and they might know a couple of people. So this is in this case, the label that should go on here. This is actually a karate club or a karate school, and the colors. This is a classic example of network theory. The colors are actually when this school split apart. So number 1 was heavily connected with all of his friends. Call it 34 and 33 were heavily connected on their friends, and the school split apart. Yeah, 12 just kind of hanging out. All right. This gets into a little bit more interesting. Looks like a bird's nest? Yep. This is real world data, by the way. You all know this very, very well. Social network of? Nope.
Snapchat.
Nope.
Facebook.
Nope. It's a social network. It's not an online social network, though. So we use social networks, but it's like, got me. This is a high school. All right. So this is a combined mid-school high school in Chicago. That's what are some things you notice about it?
That there are plenty of like yellows, and then there's also greens, and there's also many reds, like mixed among them.
Yeah, so we have three colors: yellows, greens, and reds. They're connected in some weird way.
Barely any of the greens even touch the yellows.
You can tell there's not too many that are like, that don't really talk, that are, I guess, antisocial.
There are a couple people who are antisocial. I'm over here probably, right? A couple of people who are not connected with anyone. They didn't, basically, this is just your reported friends. These guys might have transferred in, might be new, who knows. But these guys didn't report anything there. Everybody else, you have these big clusters, right?
Also interesting that it's a directional map.
It's no directional graph. It's just the way the algorithm kind of spreads apart so you can visualize it.
No, I just mean that the edges are directed.
Oh, yes. Oh, the edges are directed. Yeah. So this person reports, I'm friends with him. This person didn't report, I'm friends with him.
Yeah, the only mutuals I see are at the top.
Yeah. The way it's represented is the mutual connections clustered clumped closer together. So the people who are somebody reports being friends with them, I get pushed out, but no, without a tie back. This was made in 2004, also. So this is prehistoric by data standards. All right. So this is an interesting graph. We have the you see that top bottom split. That's actually mid school to high school. The colors. The yellow dots represent it's colored by race. So the white dots represent, or the yellow dots represent Anglo students. So the green dots represent African American students, and the pink dots are Hispanic students. So you can kind of tell something about the friendship communities, if you will. So all these people hang out with each other, all these people hang out with each other, not many people in between. And then you have another group of people that's kind of interspersed with everybody. So this tells us something pretty distinct about kind of, if you will, like the legacy of segregation on some of the schools, whether it is self-segregating or whether it is bottom-up emergent or whether it's the scar left from that. Okay. Socioeconomics. What do we have in this model? Sheep, wolves, and grass. Okay. Rock, paper, scissors. In this case, we have a stable ecosystem because the wolves eat the sheep eat the grass. If one gained dominance, the entire system would fall apart, just like we saw earlier. But with this, we have what's called a chaotic stability, which is pretty cool. So, thus the need for models to demonstrate why we need wolves in ecosystems. Right now, if you want some of the better paying jobs out there, you're a data scientist. And what does that mean? Basically, it means most people have phones. Phones are generating enormous amounts of data on you. All right, so they know when you turn on your phone, they know when you turn off your phone, they know when you turn on the app, they know what you're doing with the app. All of that data, it's kind of the new gold rush, the new oil rush, if you will. And the cool thing about data science is it's as much art as it is science. Okay, so all about graphically representing cool things. Here's a really nice infographic, quite information dense. But this is a nice example of just looking at street orientations of cities. So let's say I want to look at New York versus Santa Fe, or Albuquerque versus Mobile, Alabama, or something like that. All right. Just by looking at the orientation of the streets, we can see what cities are really, really north-south oriented, and what cities are really, really what we'll call scraggly. Is a technical term. All right. One cool thing that pops out to me in this map is cities in the United States kind of had different origin points. So the major driving factor in the United States was the car, the automobile. So cities built after the car, like cities that grew out after 1945, are these really, really grid-like cities. And cities that were, actually this is the entire world, I'm sorry, cities that were older than the car. Rome is down there in the far corner because you just have to have the shortest paths between cities. I can tell you something about like when the city was really expanded, or maybe what cities are really, really weird. This is a website called Flowing Data. And this is one of my favorite websites because it has just a ton of data visualizations. All right. I encourage you all to just kind of pass through here and see what really. So this is what I alluded to earlier. So there's a meme out there that is like impeach this, and it shows this map, right? And actually we can scale it to population. And the graphical impact of all that red kind of goes away, right? You scale it to population.
Don't all the little pieces of red make up for most of the blue?
They do. It actually equals about 50-50, which is the truth of the country. So. But instead of, point being, instead of this, which is like 90%, right? Okay, so that's flowing data. And just about anything you can think about can be, anything you can measure, anything you can, count can be considered data. You can visualize it. And that's your creativity. There are simple ways to do it, like the graphs and net logo, or you can be as crazy as like this one. If it works. There it is. You can be as crazy as this one. So this is National Oceanographic Administration, like just wind speed, graphed every single minute of every single day out into this. I don't know if this is using WebGL or something like that. This is just what is the wind today, and you can tell things about. I guess it's really windy near Dallas. Might have hurricane, might have tornadoes soon. Versus where we are, right about here.
You should be able to generate too.
Ah.
I'll say we're about right there, right? Is it windy outside? How do you know?
The leaves are blowing.
I look out the window instead. Okay. For those of you who are on Reddit or do Reddit, this is Data is Beautiful, which likewise is just a ton of really cool visualizations. So, there's one that's useful, like what battery lasts longer, and they scale the battery size according to how long it lasts. If it tells us something about things, then I'll ignore the aesthetics. Check this one out. That's one of my favorites. So if I push a bicycle, right? If I just let a bicycle go, it's going to wobble for a while. This is just like that simulation that I did. So just like that model of wolf and sheep, or the model of rock, paper, scissors. This is a computational model, a physics model of a bicycle that we just like iterate, kick it a number of times. So most of them fall down somewhere in here. Most, others will fall down here. We can tell something about the dynamics of how a bike works just by looking at like where it's more likely to fall down where it's unlikely to fall down. And then the cool things are the majority case and the outliers. Okay. And so on and so on. You've heard of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch?
Oh, yeah.
What we are about in the challenge is computational modeling and simulation. This is I don't know if this is real world data or if this is simulation, but a good model should be very, very close to the real world. So, is this a good model? You know who that is? Is it a good? It's a good model in this room. If some random person from outside came in, though, they wouldn't know what that is. Cool. So this is all. This. What was that one?
Yeah.
That's a Gaussian distribution of the colors in a photo of Gauss.
What about the one right over here?
Actually, that's not a Gaussian distribution. That's just a photo of Gauss and the distribution of colors in the photo. So yeah, this data visualization, data art, data science, you can spend the rest of your life into it. I encourage you guys with your projects, with your models, get out there and collect data, find creative ways to show that data, and have fun with it, impress people. Stay cool. Here's one more thing I was asked to show. So here's one of the websites. So at the end of the challenge, we have a poster session. This is PictoChart, so you can go ahead and put in your data, and you can generate quite nice charts with it. So this is the challenge from last. This is a survey of challenge participants in the past. Basically, did you go to college? Did you go out of state? Et cetera, et cetera. What's your demographics and things like that? So, PictoChart's this one. Very easy way to generate very decent looking posters. So, another way to visualize stuff. And of course, you have your tools in Excel. Google has Google data. And just feel free to email any and all of us at the challenge, and we can help you out. Need specific help? So this is, that's JP. You can email me at jp@sanfe.edu. Good luck, have fun. Class dismissed.